Today we're going to be talking about the risks if Joe Biden wins the presidency in November. If you think about it, this is more, I'm not telling you how to vote, this is more like a prospectus. When you invest in a company, there's always a prospectus that tells you about the risks that are involved. And so let's look at the risks that are involved in the case of Joe Biden winning the presidency. One of the things that I think is very important is realizing that his political party, the Democratic Party, it's run by very radical socialists now, and that's kind of just a fact. What that means is we have to consider that the historical stock market returns and things of that sort when Democrats win may not really necessarily apply with Joe Biden. Maybe we're dealing with something that's very, very different from what has existed in the past in American history. What I mean by this is that he's not like a JFK or someone like that who the market will work just fine and businesses go on as it always has. Maybe what we're dealing with is kind of, maybe a vote for him is somewhat like a regime change. So a lot of the historical data doesn't make a lot of sense. As a result, I think it's important to actually carefully think about what state, for instance, is very similar to the ideology of someone like Joe Biden. And one example would be this state, California. This state has adopted a lot of Joe Biden's policies. For instance, the tax rates are extremely high, and energy costs are extremely high. The gasoline costs like $5 a gallon, and that's because there are policies that are similar to the Green New Deal. So does California's economy collapse because people like that won? Well, it did for some people. If you're in Silicon Valley, no, things are fine. Apple, Google, they're all located here, but they're also able to pay the extraordinary cost doing business here. There are a lot of businesses that can't. If you're a low margin business, you're not going to be doing very well in California, and I suspect that's also true in the event that the same policies are enacted nationwide. What it means is that it would be actually more difficult for energy, for businesses that use up a lot of energy. What businesses are those? That would be manufacturing. Manufacturing probably would not do very well in a Joe Biden presidency. Major reason why things like the Green New Deal just make energy very, very expensive, and so you would want to outsource those kinds of things to someplace like China or India. That's just the way it works when you increase the cost of energy. Another issue is the issue with taxation. Now, it's one thing if a state has a very high income tax rate, people can say, hey, I don't want to deal with that anymore, and they can move. But if it applies nationwide and worldwide, then there's not a lot of opportunities to get around that. So it kind of reduces a lot of freedom. Whereas in the state, if people don't like it, they can leave. And I think that's one great benefit. The other thing is just stock market returns. Would the stock market collapse if Joe Biden wins? Well, I think that considering his party does support very high capital gains rates and very high income tax rates, I think it's likely that some people at least would actually be selling before he took office, because they would want to get the more favorable tax rates before the higher ones went into effect. So yeah, there, at least temporarily, there would actually probably be a substantial drop, just because a lot of people would want to actually sell now in order to get the higher benefits of the lower tax rate now. So I do suspect that there would be a lot of people selling. Now, long term, what would probably do well? Well, I think Bitcoin would be something that would do actually rather well during the Joe Biden presidency, just because people would know that there's nobody responsible who's going to ensure the spending does not get out of control. So a lot of people would actually be buying Bitcoin in order to get out of fiat, because fiat is a huge risk. The government gives us print a limited amount of money, which means your paper money goes down in value. And the only way to deal with that is to get Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not controlled by who wins the presidency. Now, who wins the presidency probably affects to some extent the value of Bitcoin, because if you're more fearful of the dollar going down, you're probably going to buy more Bitcoin if that's the case. Another thing that's important to realize is that you definitely would get a very two-tiered situation. Like in California, wealthy people, a lot of them do just fine. There are lots of wealthy people over here, and yeah, the tax rates are very high, but a lot of them just see it as a inconvenience. Now, middle class people, a lot of them are on the edge and they can barely afford housing, energy costs, and things like that. So many of them are really not doing too well. I had my car towed away like a week ago, and what happened is the tow truck driver talked about how these socialist policies that exist in Los Angeles, it just makes it very difficult to operate a tow truck. It makes it difficult for him to afford housing, energy costs, and to pay all the enormous taxes. And so as a result, that kind of problem would actually exist nationwide, because I drove all across the US, and in a lot of places you actually meet middle class people. There actually are people who are not insane, whereas here, okay, look, here's an example. There's a home for sale. This home is probably, I know in Texas, this home probably is not a big deal. Probably would go for, I don't know, 300,000-400,000 maybe, and over here it's probably 3 to 4 million. So it just shows you kind of the irrationality of certain policies. You just make housing costs very restrictive, you make taxes very high, you're really creating a very two-tier system where some people can do just fine with this because they make a very high income, they're in Hollywood, they're in tech and things like that, and that's one reason why many of those people are supporting the Biden presidency, because it doesn't really impact them too much, and they're thinking about what they hope to get. For instance, traditionally Democrats have been very strong on copyright protection, so that's one reason why when they make a movie they get the copyright protection for, I think it's more than 90 years, which is pretty intense. So things like that, that's the kind of thing that people like in Hollywood would appreciate, because they want enormous copyright protection that's more than what's reasonable. Now, in terms of just capital gains rates, it's possible that you would actually get a situation like you do in California, where there is no such thing as a capital gains rate. What actually happens in the end is that basically when you sell your stock, it's seen as just ordinary income, which is a much higher rate than capital gains. So that is part of, because this is very much like a socialist state, like some of the people who were going up against Biden, and a lot of those people would be enacting policies nationwide. So if it exists here, probably would exist nationwide under a Biden presidency as time went on. And that's something that's really important to consider, that a lot of these preferential tax laws that have existed for a long time, it's possible that would actually be changed. And I think a lot of people would be surprised by that, because the truth is that a lot of these policies were based upon a lot of smart thinking, that you want to encourage investing. That's one reason why you provide a unique tax rate for like selling homes or selling stock if you own them for more than a year. And you're going to be losing out on those kind of things under Biden presidency. And not only that, but of course you'll be spending more money on energy. And of course I also do think that there would be at least a temporary stock market crash, just because there would be fear of the higher tax rates. But here's someone who thinks, this is a group of people who do think that Biden is great though. Let's look over here. Really big signs. So it's a little bit different than when I was growing up, because around in 2000, a lot of these people would say that they're supporting the Democrats because, oh, they're for the poor or something like that. But over here, it's actually very, very different. It's people in big giant mansions. So in closing, I'm not trying to tell you how to vote. I'm basically giving you like a prospectus, a list of risks that exists by going down a particular course. And since I do live here in California, I actually know a lot about what these policies will look like in practice if they're implemented nationwide. So feel free to leave a comment below. It doesn't matter how you vote. I love you all the same, but I just wanted to give you some insight about the different policies that exist So subscribe and hit the like button.